Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Kubernetes community call. I'm Tim Pepper. I'm an engineer at VMware, and I'm the moderator for today. As is normal, we've got a rotating set of volunteers moderating, taking notes, and presenting. And if you'd like to contribute, I suggest you reach out to George Castro and volunteer. Also, as is the norm in our community, this call is being recorded. So remember, what you do and say here is going to be on the record on the internet for all time. Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking, and just be courteous to other speakers. For those who are presenting, or if you have cause to ask a question or things start getting interactive, I just ask that folks be mindful of the overall agenda and time slots. We obviously want a collaborative meeting, but also need to make sure we cover the things that we're intending to. Minutes are being kept in a Google Doc. We've got people scribing, and feel free to collaborate that. And then afterwards, the recording will be posted to the YouTube channel. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Richard, who's going to be doing an Ambassador API Gateway demo today. And Richard, we can see your screen now.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Tim. So, and thank you, everyone, for joining. So I'm here to talk about the Ambassador API Gateway. It's an open source API gateway, Apache software license. We've built this for Kubernetes only. It doesn't run outside of Kubernetes. And as a consequence, its architecture is very, very simple. So we don't have a database. We persist to Kubernetes. It's a Kubernetes deployment, so you can scale and manage it using all the various features and functions of Kubernetes. And we've also adopted a declarative decentralized configuration scheme using Kubernetes annotations so that different service authors can actually just annotate their Kubernetes service and configure the API gateway. So what we found over time is that as a lot of organizations have adopted this microservices paradigm, they really want their service authors to do certain operational things like publish the service or configure how you route traffic to a service or canary upgrade a service, and Ambassador sort of designed for those use cases. And we're fully buzzword compliant with support for gRPC, H2, rate limiting, etc. And the secret to our buzzword compliance is that Ambassador is actually built on the Envoy proxy. So the Envoy proxy, if you're not familiar with it, is an open source layer 7 proxy originally built by the team at Lyft. And it's now used inside Ambassador, inside Istio. Lots of other organizations are actually using Envoy. It's got a really amazing upstream community, similar to Kubernetes. It's very open, lots of discussion, lots of collaboration. And I think for the purpose of this conversation, the main thing I wanted to point out about Envoy is that it's really designed for machine configuration. It has a very sophisticated configuration file format. A lot of the configuration itself is also designed to be dynamic. So they also expose a lot of that functionality through gRPC-based APIs. And so if you really want to deploy and manage Envoy in a particular configuration, you actually more or less end up writing some code. And so the reason why we wrote Ambassador is to obviate the need for writing some of that code. And so the Ambassador architecture is very simple. We basically talk to the Kubernetes API, we get notified when there are configuration changes, and we actually operate as a sidecar to Envoy. And so every time there's a configuration change, we compute the necessary changes to Envoy, we configure Envoy appropriately, we handle things like connection draining and restarting Envoy if necessary. And the net result is all of your traffic actually flows through Envoy. So you do get sort of raw Envoy performance, and sort of the management layer, if you will, of Envoy is done by Ambassador. So with that as sort of the quick overview, I'm going to actually show a couple quick examples. So right here, you see the YAML for deploying Ambassador. I've already deployed Ambassador in a Kubernetes cluster. And you can see this is just a standard Kubernetes service. We create roles, cluster role binding, and then the heart of it is just the deployment where you can specify replicas, and we give you a Docker image that you can deploy, and we provide liveness and readiness probes by default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually apply a route to the HTTP bin service. And if you look at my configuration, it's very simple. It's just a Kubernetes service. It doesn't actually go anywhere interesting in Kubernetes. And I create a mapping object with a name, a prefix, and have it go to a particular destination. And in this case, we support a whole bunch of additional annotations on top of your core mapping, like host rewrite, where we override your default HTTP host parameters, to go to htbin.org. And so now I can test this out by doing a curl. And you should see that I get the IP address. So now my service is actually talking to the htbin service. Ambassador includes integrated diagnostics. So we show a UI of entire routing table. You can see here, here's the HTTP bin service. It's going htbin.org. And we do this so that it's actually easy to actually troubleshoot. And so we show all the configuration that we've generated. So this is how we support people who are trying to troubleshoot their configuration of Ambassador. I'm going to show one other feature of Ambassador here. Ambassador actually supports the concept of shadowing traffic. And so here I actually have a simulated service where I'm sending tweets, simulated tweets, not real tweets, through the Ambassador API gateway. And this is routing to a stream service in production. And shadowing or mirroring is a feature of Envoy where you can actually take all the requests and duplicate those requests to another service and drop the responses. So this is really useful if you want to test a service on production traffic. And so I've got a stream service, which is taking these tweets and just logging them to a database. And then I also have created a stream shadow service. And the magic of my stream shadow service is I'm running this GDPR filter. I just got back from Coupon EU, where I'm turning the author to be anonymous and adding a sleep to simulate a performance bug. And if I just apply the stream shadow.yaml here, you'll see here I've configured a service with a mapping, the prefix, a destination inside my cluster, and I set shadow to be true. And if I actually tail with Stern my log here, oh, I should actually open up another window. You'll see that actually my, if this terminal actually opens, oh, here we go. So you'll see that on the right-hand side here, I'm actually getting live traffic, and I've colorized it so they all say anonymous. And you'll have to trust me here because I'm not going to just let this scroll by. But you're basically seeing the same tweets that are coming in on production as they are on the shadow service, except the shadow service is running different codes. So you're actually able to test that. And then with Ambassador, we also expose all these stats through statsd. And so you can actually see, if I hit refresh here, that the latency of the shadow service, because I added that sleep, is actually quite a bit higher than that of my my P99 latency is actually much higher than that of my production stream service. So this is sort of the general overview of Ambassador. So metrics, monitoring, and shadowing, and we support rate limiting and authentication and sort of all the general features you would expect in an API gateway. And that's basically it. So if you've got any questions, we have a website on GitHub, and then we also have a Gitter channel. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, we can take a minute if anybody has a question they'd like to ask. Otherwise, definitely appreciate the demo, the information, Richard. And if you could link the slides that you'd presented there into the meeting minutes, that would be really appreciated. And then for others following along in the meeting minutes, there are also links off to the project pages and further information as well.
Great. Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
All right, moving on then into the next section, we've got a set of release updates. First on the 1.11 work that's underway right now from Josh Burkus.
Howdy. So this is week 6, I believe, of 1.11. And at this point, we are approaching two important deadlines. One is beta 0, and the other 2 days after that is the evaluation point where we see whether or not we can shorten code freeze. So as such, right now, what we are focused entirely on is fixing some of these test fails on end-to-end tests and upgrade tests and scalability tests. So I'm going to turn this over to Aish, who is going to explain where we are with CI signal and test fails for 111.
Cool. Thanks, Josh. So let me quickly present. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. To give an overview, early when we started this week, we kind of were in a good space where the master blocking, we are monitoring like 2 suites right now. One is the master blocking and the master upgrade, as Josh was saying. To begin the week, we were like pretty stable, and then we had a very busy week where all GKE tests were on fire. And then we were also like seeing a bunch of upgrade issues. So during the week, we've been actively working with the different SIGs, and thanks to the different various members in the release group itself, we've like divided the responsibilities, and we are focusing on, each of us are focusing on different SIGs to make sure that we have these test failures investigated and hopefully fixed before beta, which is on the 15th. The good news is now things are again stabilizing. As you can see, master blocking is kind of almost green. We have a few storage issues for which the fixes are in flight, and we have a couple of one scalability issue for which, again, both Sham and Jordan, they are working on a PR to address this. So I did see a couple of kube admin failures crop up this morning. I'm yet to investigate that and follow up on that. But overall, this looks kind of stable, and I'm hopeful that we can hold this up until beta. Upgrade is a little bit more it's in a little bit more rocky situation. But the good news is, if you go through these tabs, you'll see most of the failures that you see are common across the different jobs. So it's just a top few failures that are surfacing everywhere. So I have this, if I can move the tab here. Okay. I have this I've shared this link to this tracker out in the meeting notes. So currently, these are the top failures that we are tracking. And I also have status on where they are and who is the point of contact, and if we have PRs and what's going on. So good news is all of this are in progress. People are working on PRs, and I'm hopeful that it could land by end of the week or at least by Tuesday. There are a couple here that we haven't seen any traction on. So I'll be following up with them closely today. As for the upgrade tests, there is an Uber issue, umbrella issue that Tim and DIMS and all of them are actively following up on. So we are hopeful that we can get to the upgrade tests also during this week. So if anybody's interested, please follow along in this tracker. So that's the main update. Josh, am I missing anything?
Josh?
Sorry, Zoom was hiding from me. So are we now getting responses from all SIGs on at least some of their test failure issues?
Yes, it's been really, it's been looking up since yesterday. Okay. So we are getting good. I'm also following up on the issues. There's more frequent status updates and also links to PRs that might resolve the issues. The ones that I've marked in red are the ones that we'll have to follow up a little closely, which I plan to do today. One is the SIG network, specifically on the networking granular checks. Almost all of their tests there seem to be failing. So I'll have to follow up on that. This started happening only yesterday. So I'll follow up on that closely today. So yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. So I will update everyone on the Kubernetes development mailing list on Monday with what our status is on those and whether or not beta 0 is going to be going out on time. because we're not going to be putting out a beta if test status doesn't improve, but it looks like it is going to improve. Oh, and the one other thing from the release is that we now have the full feature tracking spreadsheet up, which I linked from the notes. So a list of our 43, I believe, features for 1.11. So if you are interested in particular features, please check that. And that is the 1.11 release for this week. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks, Aish, as well. We have a small update on the 1.10 patch release stream. Patch Manager isn't able to make it today, but just wanted to let everybody know that the 0.3 release is currently planned for Monday, May 21st, so about 11 days out. And Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal spreadsheet with a lot of incredibly detailed information. I was wondering if that's something that you've been maintaining by hand, or do you have anything that's like feeding that data somehow?
No, I've been just maintaining it by hand, which is sad because that's. But given this is the first release cycle, I've not been able to look into improving it, like adding some tooling or anything towards it. But yeah, it's just been me going through all the different tabs. And then
cool. Thank you very much for that. That's a lot. Speaking as somebody who's attempted to do that before, that's a lot of effort, and that's a ton of information all in one place.
Thank you. But thanks to you guys for like having some precedent in the past. It's helped me. And thanks for, as I was saying, the other SIG release team members as well. They've been super helpful in sharing the load a little bit. So that's helpful.
And it's also later in the meeting, we've got our shout out segment, but while we're at it, just mention that there was a shout out this week to Aish, and Aish has really been Wonder Woman so far on this release. It's really awesome work.
Thanks all. Thank you.
All right, then moving on, our next section of the agenda is SIG Updates. We have 2 SIGs this week that will be sharing information updates. The first is architecture, and Brian Grant, I think I see in the room in the background there.
We're unmuted. Hey, I'm Brian, co-chair of SIG Architecture. For those who don't know what SIG Architecture does, we try to provide technical guidance and oversight across the entire project, things that need to be consistent across multiple SIGs. So these include things like what is in scope for the project as a whole at a technical level. So defining what is Kubernetes, reviewing a set of conformance tests, which are increasingly kind of becoming the definition of what a compatible, conformance certified Kubernetes is, providing the architectural principles and guidelines and conventions, and API guidelines and conventions, deprecation policy, those sorts of things that apply across the entire API surface across all SIGs. So we're trying to document more of those things, improve more of the documentation. We're working on some things to help this. So we've been working on formalizing the proposal process using what we call now a KEP process, Kubernetes Enhancement Proposal process. So that's still ongoing. We're trying to streamline that as opposed as a replacement eventually, hopefully, for the kind of cargo cult based proposal process that we have now. I think there's only about 1 sentence of documentation anywhere that describes our current proposal process or our pre-existing proposal process. So we're just trying to formalize that and provide more structure and make it more obvious to people what they should be doing, like what should have a formal proposal, what is important to include in that proposal, how do you, importantly, how do you actually bring a proposal to closure so you know you can move ahead with the implementation, things like that. We also have been discussing an API review process, formalizing that. We've had about 5 people who have traditionally done a large fraction of all the API reviews. So it has been informal in terms of how to do a review, what to look for, things like that. So we want to formalize that. We do have office hours. So if you have questions about, is this the right way to do something, or does this follow our API convention, or I have this new kind of extension mechanism I want to add, is that okay? Definitely sign up for the Kubernetes SIG architecture office hours. They're on the meetings and the office hours on Thursday mornings at 8:30 Pacific. You can go to the community repo to find our information about the meeting times, calendar, Zoom, agenda doc, and all those things. Definitely make sure you're in the agenda doc because we do use it. And we have a Slack channel if you have questions. And a mailing list, of course. Lately, we've been working on our charter, trying to outline these areas that we work on into kind of more formal, convert them to more formal sub-projects. Today, we had a big discussion on improving the conformance tests and other major things happening in the, major changes to Kubernetes or big new architectural changes. SIG architecture is the place where those get discussed. So we have a small crew that attends regularly, but if there's something that is important that you want to learn about, definitely feel free to come. That's about it.
All right, thank you, Brian. And the next SIG is also in the same room there, Paris Pittman, giving an update on contributor experience.
Hi, everyone. I did in the agenda link to the slide deck that we created last week for the contributor experience update that will have, that will have much more detailed information as to things like our full sub-project list and things like that. First thing I wanted to say that we do have a new contributor site underway. This will be something along the lines of like contributor.kubernetes.io, something like that, built with Hugo. The link to the KEF is in the agenda. If you have anything that you'd like to add or share or opinions there, please feel free to add. That development is underway right now. We have just spun up an instance of Discourse, which is a forum that's 100% open source, and we're ready to test it. It's discuss.kubernetes.io, so please post any content that you have there, announcements, meetup reminders, or just introduce yourself to see if this will work for our community. We are looking for mentors. Now we have roughly 6 different mentoring programs, all built with time in mind. And now we're looking for mentors. One of those is our Meet Our Contributors monthly YouTube series. Link in the agenda to that so you can see what we're talking about. But this is roughly 4 to 6 contributor mentor types who come on and answer questions that have to do with things like why is my test flaking, all the way to why they got into open source or Kubernetes, how to be an approver, just very general questions like that about someone's growth here within Kubernetes as a contributor. We are going to be doing a contributor experience survey that's going to go out in June. This will cover everything from our communication platforms and your experience with them, all the way to just how you like the workflow and the automation within GitHub, and how we can possibly help and tailor that. From our deep dive at KubeCon Copenhagen, we discussed the developer guide, and now we are officially underway with a new developer guide. The developer guide right now, we do have a very lengthy and robust devel repo on the community repo. Folder on the community repo. And we're now just trying to surface that and make all the docs in there up to date and have additional information that's relevant to now. With the contributor site, we are really hoping that a lot of the discoverability woes will be taken care of there. So if you also, the link to the umbrella issue there is in the agenda. So if you have any advice or things that you want to see out of the dev guide, please click that and add your comments. And that's really it for me.
All right. Thank you, Paris. We did have one question in the chat. Folks interested in contributing to the new contributor site, and where to go. And the answer is reach out to the contributor experience SIG Slack. And is there an issue associated with the KEP, Paris, issue number?
Yep.
And
yep. I can put that in there.
Drop that in the minutes and maybe a place for folks to catch up on conversation around it.
For sure. And everybody is also more than welcome to our weekly meetings that we have on Wednesdays or mailing list, aka send us an owl. We'll get to you.
All right. Thank you. Chris, was that a hand up or adjust the headphones? Chris Short. Headphones. Okay. Just checking. So next on the agenda then is announcements. So we have our usual shout outs. There is a channel and Slack #shoutouts. If there's anybody that you would ever like to give a shout out to, that's the place to do it. And then we roll them up in the community meeting here. So recent ones, Ihor has sent a thanks out to, is it Justin Augustus? And that was on his work as release shadow for the features with Ihor. And as mentioned earlier, Josh Burkus, a big shout out to Aish for all the work she's doing on CI Signal lead for the 1.11 release team as well. One from me to Aaron Krickenberger, who just recently announced he's going to take a little bit of time off and get some R&R in, rest and relaxation, well deserved. So just a shout out and thank you for all the leadership you've been giving to the project lately. Thank you. Chuck Ha has a shout out to the doc team, notes that working on the website is such a good experience now that it's on Hugo. The page rebuild time went from about 20 seconds to 60 milliseconds, and a heart emoji. And Jason DeTiber would like to thank Lee Capilli, aka @StealthyBox on Slack and or GitHub, for the hard work and long hours helping to fix Cube ADM upgrade issues. A second shout out in a row this week for Lee, and I would echo that shout out. I think maybe on behalf of Aish and probably Tim St. Clair and others, this upgrade set of issues has been a persistent problem just lately, and it's really great to see some progress on that, positive progress. Shout out from George Castro and Paris Pittman to Vanessa Herrick and the rest of the CNCF Linux Foundation personnel that helped pull off a great contributor summit and KubeCon. I know I can speak from my experience there that it was a great week, so thank you there. Shout outs to our top Stack Overflow users in the last little while. We have Anton Kostenko, Nicola Ben, Maruf Tuhin, Jonah Benton. So thank you all there very much. That's a great way to support the community, helping answer questions. So we have an announcement from the docs team regarding the Hugo transition. I feel like I saw Jennifer on. Jennifer, would you like to speak to that one?
Let's see, I'm not looking at the agenda at the moment.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that had come from you.
Can you give me a clue?
So it says, we've successfully migrated Kubernetes.io from Jekyll to Hugo.
Okay, that's really the sum total of it.
Okay.
We have quite a backlog. There's a little bit of chatter in the SIG Docs channel right now about the fact that everybody's been conferencing. This week has been Write the Docs, and most of the Docs maintainers were at Write the Docs, and then we were at a Docs summit yesterday. So we are getting back on triage and rolling through the PRs and issues as quickly as we can, but there will be a little bit of lag here. So if the community can just bear with us. We extra appreciate Chuck's shout out because that's a validation already for the benefits the community is getting, but sort of bringing things back to the expected workflows just going to take us a bit more catching up to do.
All right. Thank you, and thank you for the ongoing work. I can attest that personally over the last number of months, I witnessed the change and improvements on the doc site, and I'd imagine the community does as well.
I thank you on behalf of all the maintainers and contributors.
So next up, George, it looks like there's a mention of KEP on the community meeting. Was there something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something. Someone pointed out to me at KubeCon that there's a lot of KEPs incoming via pull requests, and there's a lot of things that should probably be discussed. So I just wanted like a show of hands or something. Lately, we've been finishing the meetings earlier and being more efficient of maybe either alternating in a section with the graph of the week where we would discuss a KEP of the week, or if there was a way that we could service more of the things that are happening in KEPs of the community meeting to kind of foster communication. So if you feel strongly about that +1, -1 in the sidebar, or if anyone has any comments with regard to that, especially since some of these KEPs might be touching across.
So one thing I would recommend is if you create a KEP or you recognize a KEP that you think is important, email the relevant mailing lists and possibly SIG architecture as well. Every KEP is supposed to list the SIG that owns it and participating SIGs. So if you believe those are the right things, send a link to the PR to those mailing lists. GitHub notifications for people who probably should be looking at them are not as useful as you might think. Like the signal to noise ratio is still very bad, regardless of how smart your filters are for people who get a lot of notifications. So, please use other channels as well to raise visibility of those things.
Anybody else with comments on that? I personally, and George and I had spoken about this the other day, but I really like the idea if there's things that cross multiple SIGs, or just as a general shout out to everybody to give a heads up, this is a great meeting forum to do that.
I think it would be worth trying. I know there are some who've been attending these community meetings for years and years and talk about how back in the old days, it was like we were actually talking about real heavy concrete design and stuff. And so this could be a throwback to that sort of thing. My only caveat is that this seems like a symptom that this is a really high visibility place and people are trying to get their work to be shown in a high visibility place. And I'm not entirely sure what the motivation is, other than maybe we don't have a high enough visibility place for KEPs, which I thought was sort of part of the reason for trying to create more of a contributor site where we could have like a database of KEPs or something more CRUD-like to give them more attention. So I would view having a regular rotation of talking about KEPs more as a bootstrap process until we find sort of the longer term sustainable way of, and a KEP is a Kubernetes enhancement proposal. So I literally just had somebody talk to me one-on-one this morning about like, hey, what's the, can I map out the lifecycle of a design proposal? And that's literally what a KEP is supposed to be. And we're in this weird in-between state, I think, where people don't necessarily have to use KEPs. If you want to write a design proposal and just shove it through, you can. But KEPs are our way of attempting to add structured metadata to the top of that markdown file, saying explicitly who owns it and who's going to be approving it, and what's the SIG that owns it, and where it is in the life cycle, so we can try and keep track of this to avoid the problem we've had over the past couple of years where there are lots of design proposals in the design proposals directory, and it's really unclear which of those have actually been implemented and to what degree they've been implemented, or if it's still just a catch-all for good ideas. So I would, yeah, thank you. So I would expect—
I think it would be awesome if—
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was going to say, I think it would be awesome if someone could just scrape the set of KEPs that are open and would just put them at the bottom of the agenda for this meeting every week. So we can just briefly mention, hey, these are the KEPs that are under discussion. Please take a look.
I could do that. That's an easy one. And then KEP 5 is the KEP that will allow us to index and search KEPs and things like that. Because right now, if you try to search for KEP something, it's impossible. You almost have to go into GitHub and know the name of the KEP. So we're working on making those indexable. You should be able to see which ones are open, which ones have been implemented, all that good stuff. So I will do. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. So next up, we have Farina, who would like to speak about the Kubernetes application survey results.
Hello. So we performed the application survey a little while ago. It finished up before KubeCon and the raw results came out. I'll share my screen real quick here. Let me know when you can see it.
We can see it.
All right. So this is the raw results from the application survey. We asked questions. It took folks 5-10 minutes, depending on how many things they're using. This was all about running applications within Kubernetes, looking at tools that the Kubernetes project owns and what people think of them, the parts they use of them, and how that works, along with APIs such as the workload controllers and things like that. And so the raw results are available for everybody, and the link is in the meeting minutes today. In addition to that, because it can be a little bit hard to navigate, we've also started to, there's a blog post on this as well that's in the notes. We've also started a deck where we start to analyze some of the things and put graphs in. And so I'll look at a little of that real quick here. And so you can see, how do people describe their experience with Kubernetes, whether they operate applications on it or not. In this deck, we've looked at things like some of the insights we've pulled out, such as the number of people who answered it who don't actually operate applications in Kubernetes, but operate clusters. And so one of the things that kind of signaled to me was that people wanted a place where they could share their view on things, even if it wasn't the exact way to go. So a fair number of pieces of the feedback we've got through here were actually folks' view on dealing with things like cluster management, in addition to application management, which is slightly different. Yeah, and there was a neat thing here that 77% of people who said they develop applications that interact with the Kubernetes API also are operating applications in Kubernetes. And I don't know if that's because we've got a lot of the tool developers who happen to take the survey, or a lot of people just have to build their own workflows. There's some more insight on that earlier. But we got insight into things such as when it comes to core controllers, how are people using things? Like there's 24% of folks who use this are actually supplementing the core controllers with their own controllers. And that, I think that's a good justification for some of the work that folks are doing with meta controllers and some of the other things to make creating custom controllers a little bit easier. But I won't go through everything in this deck. There's a lot on different tools, and we're still expanding it. Like I haven't finished filling out the stuff around kube control yet, which that one's turning out to be hard because it got maybe the most verbose responses of any of the tools. But there are a lot of graphs in here which make things easy to use, like what are folks doing with dashboard? Or if we go into Helm, there's a lot of detail on Helm on how folks are using it. Or the different charts on, I'll scroll down to some of this. We ask questions in there such as, how do you want to do things? Always, are usually, sometimes, never, and not applicable. And so do you want to be able to visualize the objects that make up an application? Folks usually want to do that, right? I want to be able to visualize the Kubernetes parts that sometimes make up an application, right? Or there's this one got the most always. I want to be able to find the version of an application I'm running. We got details on this that is meant to help inform us as we craft some of the experience and the details, but that's all available in here. We also looked at the kinds of tools folks were using. So we asked what publicly available tools, and we listed a bunch of tools that people are using. This may be a little bit small on your screen. It's an image that can be expanded to if you want to copy this for yourself. And these were just the tools that people were using. You can see a couple of them jump out, but we also asked what other tools did folks have, and we got to see some neat things in here. So like one of them in here was Kube CTX, or Kube Context, I'm guessing. That's a helper to Kube control. It was one that I wasn't even familiar with, and it adds some features that I know personally have been a pain point for me, and others have done that as well. So actually looking through and seeing what folks are using can give insight into the kinds of tools. But there are plenty of charts with details. Does your organization build your own in-house tools? right? That was one of the questions. And then we even asked folks, why do you build your own in-house tools? And we pull out some of the top responses. There were 168 people who responded, here's why we build our own tools. The raw data has far more information if people want to dig into it. But there's a lot of insight into this. If you're building an area or you're building a tool, whether it's Minikube, which we collected a bunch of data on, or Kube Control, or just Kubernetes in general and how people use it. You know, if they're using CI/CD, we found that about 3/4 of people are using a CI/CD to deploy and test Kubernetes configurations, right? And then you can look at, here's the different types of CI/CD systems and tools that people are using. And one of the things that caught my attention, even with CI/CD, is if you look at the container native ones like Drone, Concourse, GitLab CI, they actually outnumber the number of Jenkins users in this. And so Jenkins has very dominant, but if you look at all the others that are kind of similar to each other, but different than Jenkins, they just barely outnumber it. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of data in here. And just real quick, I wanted to say, folks, go poke at this, because this gives insight into what people think and how they're using it. And especially into some of the free text spots, if it's a project you're interested in, because people took a lot of time to give us feedback. And there's a lot of good little nuggets of information that you can't just put in a chart. But if you just sit down and maybe copy a column and paste it into a text editor, just start reading the responses people gave, there's some real good nuggets of information in there. With that, I'll just ask real quick, does anyone have any questions? I don't. Yeah.
There's a ask for the link to the slides. Are they in the minute notes? Is that the deck on results that's linked?
Yeah,
in
that's the deck on the results. It's in the meeting minutes here. Yep.
All right. So in the meeting minutes, we've got raw results data, the deck that was presented here, and also a summary blog post of information linked.
Yeah, and feel free, if there's something you're curious about in this, you can either comment on the deck or poke me. This is all being run through the App Dev Working Group, which meets every other Wednesday, the off week from SIG CLI. So next Wednesday is when we'll be meeting again.
All right. Thank you very much. Interesting information. And I definitely encourage folks to go look at that, read it. One of the things that really makes for a thriving community on a large project like this is listening to your stakeholders and users across various personas. So getting this level of feedback is really informative. So one final agenda item then is our help wanted section. SIG UI, is there anyone from SIG UI on the call who would like to speak directly to this?
On there. Kim, it's Paris. I put that on there for them. I don't think they can make that, but yes, if anyone is interested or knows folks who are interested that have JavaScript and or Go experience, they are looking for new contributors as well as possible maintainers. So feel free to either dig into an issue or to reach out to one of the folks listed on the agenda, as they have said they will gladly onboard new contributors.
I think especially in the context of the survey that Matt just presented, we can see that like 30% of the people, 31% of the people who responded said they use Kubernetes dashboard. So it can certainly use some love. And conversely, there are like 40% of the people who don't use a UI of any sort. So the majority of people responding to that survey at least would appreciate a functional UI out of the box.
Yep, and we have a lot of folks in that group that are willing to onboard, like I mentioned, so they just don't have the time, unfortunately, at this point to do full-time work on it any longer, so looking to expand their pool.
Yeah, so there's some discussion in the chat. Please use the mailing list, Kubernetes SIG UI mailing list, to reach out and offer to help or to ask questions, because the folks that have been working on it are in a bunch of different time zones, so Slack, for example, may not work as well.
Also, isn't the UI project in transition to moving to the newest version of Angular? So isn't that blocking some of the development there, or?
So this is Matt again. I'll jump in because I was with Paris in the last SIG UI meeting. They The response was that they are trying to move to a newer version of Angular. If I remember right, it's on Angular 1, and they'd like to get that updated. And so that is blocking a little bit of the work because they're only looking to bring critical fixes in. But the whole idea is right now they need contributors to keep this thing going because SIG UI, many of the people who were involved in developing and even working on that have been tasked with doing other things. And so now the call is, can we find people to come in and wrangle this and get this moving? And that's kind of the hope at the moment.
Sure. So are the contribution needs on fixing Angular 1 issues or more? Actually, I can just ask in the groups. I won't waste time on this.
Yeah, sounds good. And anybody else interested in engaging? The SIG has meetings, mailing list. Jump in and get involved. All right. Unless anybody has anything else that they would like to tack on to the end of the agenda or a question or comment to bring up, we have reached the end of today's agenda, and we could go ahead and give all of you a little bit of time back in your day.